Anyway, hopefully this goes well. We gave this talk for some of you that showed up down in Centennial yesterday. So I apologize it's the same talk, but some of the bad jokes might be different as we go along, but we'll see. But I really want to talk about, people hear about dinosaurs a lot, and I think that I don't know if that helped or not. What do you guys think? Any better? Helped a little better? Okay. Well, one of the questions people have about dinosaurs, of course, is this. Aren't dinosaurs millions of years old? That's what you're taught in schools. So as you go to public schools, if you do go to public schools like I did, I went to public schools all my life, I went to public colleges, I heard all this evolution, millions of years, millions of years, millions of years. And when I came to ICR, I almost had to retrain my brain. And it's still, you're taught old, slow, and that's what you're taught about dinosaurs. And they use dinosaurs to get to the children. And so you've got to really watch it. And so we're trying to, some of our resources are in the back that are for children to show that there is another side, that the earth is really young, that's what the rocks really support. And so I don't get to really give my flood talk today, but I'll put a little bit of that in the sermon, as you'll see along the research that I'm doing. And so one of the questions is, are they millions of years old? I don't believe they are. And you always hear, didn't dinosaurs live before humans? That's what people are taught. Dinosaurs lived a long time. Some people don't believe they got on the ark. Others think they went extinct in the flood, because they didn't get on the ark. They couldn't have interacted with humans by any means, but yet there's evidence that they did after the flood. We'll show some of that as well. So really, as I said yesterday, the Flintstones is the most accurate TV show out there. They really did have dinos and things like that after the flood. And so, but they really weren't cave people for a long time. That was just temporary housing as they were spreading out from the Tower of Babel. And some of them stuck around for a long time. But the biggest question is, are we ever going to see these gas prices again? Ever again. This was in South Dakota, I think, on the way to Badlands. My daughter, when she was pretty young there, she's now a nurse down in Colorado Springs. I'm going to spend a few days with her after we get through this next couple of days on field trips. But what does the Bible say? Let's go back, start with the Bible. Because we believe God's word is true, and the rocks are real. And so we'll look a little bit about, and the fossils are real as well. But the ages, the rocks don't tell you the ages. That's just a story they make up to be able to justify evolution. They have to have deep time so they can kind of hide behind, well, if enough time, this could happen. And geologists in the 19th century, even before they had age dating techniques, they were already talking about millions of years. And they didn't jump to hundreds of thousands of years, they jumped to millions because nobody can imagine a million years. You can imagine 1,000 years, you can imagine maybe 10,000 years, 100,000 gets iffy, but a million years is just like monopoly money. It means nothing. And they toss it around like it's real. And they justify it with these radioactive techniques, which I don't have time to talk about, but they're all based on so many assumptions that they're totally invalid. And when they do test them on known aged fossils or known aged lava flows, and they know this was 1,000 years old, this was 2,000 years old, this was 500 years old, they never get the numbers anywhere near the correct number. And so some of that's in my Carpenter's Notebook you can read about. But we're going to get back to dinosaurs because that's what you're here to hear about. But in the Bible, it says God made the beasts of the earth according to his kind. So you don't see the word dinosaur in there. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But I believe the beasts of the earth includes the dinosaurs. So on day 6, God made the land animals. It's very important because day 5, he made the birds and all the things swimming in the sea. So what's happening today in the schools and in the movies, they're pushing dinosaurs being birds. The dinosaurs are birds. That you're eating Thanksgiving turkey, you're actually eating a dinosaur. I've actually heard prominent PhD paleontologists say this. And so they believe dinosaurs are birds and they evolved into birds. So they're making birds, or dinosaurs are making them as much like a bird as they can. So they're making them warm-blooded. They're trying to say the dinosaurs are warm-blooded. We don't really know if they were. There's a lot of evidence to the contrary. So I believe they were cold-blooded, just like reptiles. They walk different, as we'll see. Secondly, they're putting feathers on them. So we'll look at that issue as well. And some of you are going to go see the new Jurassic World movie in June, and you're going to see a feathered dinosaur tromping around in there. But I don't believe there's any feathers on any dinosaur, and we'll see why. God also said he made all these beasts of the earth and all animals to eat only plants. Before Adam and Eve sinned, they ate only plants. Now, after Adam and Eve sinned, dinosaurs started eating each other. We do see the evidence in the fossilized bones buried in the flood, where the T-Rexes, in fact, very distinctive tooth, have bitten into some duck-billed dinosaurs and those dinosaurs survived the bite. They healed, the bones healed around the tooth, and you can see the actual T-Rex tooth kind of embedded in the bone. And so we know that they were actually eating each other, and there's quite a bit of evidence for that, but that was after, of course, Adam and Eve sinned. The Bible says, also to every beast of the earth I've given every green herb for food, the King James says. So everything ate plants. On the ark, Noah just brought plants to feed the dinosaurs on the ark. So dinosaurs were on the ark because there's no exclusion in the Bible. So there's creatures that moved along the ground, 2 of every kind and food. And God brought the animals to the ark. God brought the dinosaurs. He selected the 2 dinosaurs. He selected from each kind of dinosaur and brought them to the ark, like all the animals. But he also, Noah had to bring the food. So he had to bring the certain plants for each dinosaur, whatever they ate. And then it says, Genesis 7, 21 and 23, it talks about the flood, a progressive flood that worked along, burying these ecological zones and giving us the funny fossil record we have. It's not evolution, it's just you bury in different environments as you go higher and higher as the water went higher. It says everything on land perished at the breath of life. So if you weren't the 2 dinosaurs chosen from each kind to be on the ark, that you became a fossil. That's why I find so many dinosaur fossils here in Colorado. Noah's ark was very, very big. This is the minimum size of a cubit. The Bible measures in cubits, which is the length from your elbow to your finger. It depends on who the person was. But the minimum size is about 450 feet, which is about a football field and a half long. So when the Broncos have to run an extra half a football field, it'd be hard to get touchdowns. But they have a better quarterback, right? Isn't that true, the new quarterback? 75 foot wide, 45 foot high, 3 levels. So the Bible does give us a few of the dimensions and things of the ark. The ark is very, very big. And there's been people that have studied all the animals that have to be on the ark, and they even put in too many dinosaurs. And they showed that the ark might have only been half full, even with all the food. So there was a lot more room for people to get on the ark, but yet, how many people got on? How many people believe there was going to be a global flood? And how many people today believe there was a global flood? All we have to do is look down, and all around us we see fossils everywhere for thousands of feet down below our feet, and yet people don't believe there was a global flood. But in Noah's day, they never had a global flood. They didn't have the evidence left behind, and so they didn't believe it either. Only 8 people got on the ark. When God shut the door, the fates were sealed of all the people that didn't get on the ark. There might have been 1 billion people on the earth in 1,600 years, maybe more. And only 8 people get on the ark. And today, Jesus has opened that door of salvation for us. That was salvation back then. You walk through the door. Jesus opened the door of salvation for us. We just have to believe that he shed his blood on the cross. He died. God himself took on human form, came to earth, lived on earth for 33 years or so. But he came to die for you and for me. All we have to do is believe in him, and we're saved. We have that opportunity while we're alive. Once we die, that door is shut, and our fate will be sealed too. Do we choose Christ or not? And if you don't, you're destined to eternity in hell. So, the choice is there. Just like the people in Noah's day had the choice. They could have got on the ark and be saved. So a lot of them regretted it once that door was shut and the water started coming in. This was the average dinosaur size. We actually did the math. Because who doesn't love math? I did. I got a math minor. It was kind of fun. There's a point where you kind of get it. And most people don't quite get to that point. They just say, I hate math. I hate algebra too. I like calculus better. But there's a point where math does make sense. But we did the math, 350 dinosaurs. We had to weed out the birds that they had included in the dinosaur database, because the birds and dinosaurs are the same in the evolutionary community. So I had to throw all the birds out, looked at the dinosaurs. This was the average size, a good Colorado buffalo, the adult size. It's really a bison, but you guys call it a buffalo, because, I don't know, it's just slang. But that's the adult size. So on the ark, God probably brought juveniles before they hit the growth spurt. Even dinosaurs had a growth spurt, like teenagers. And so God probably brought those 2 on for each kind. So they were probably more like the size of a sheep on the average. So this is the average adult size. There's only about 60 kinds of dinosaurs. There's a lot of species, but only about 60 kinds, just like in here. If paleontologists found all of our bones, they would measure the bones and things. So, oh, there's 16 different species in here. You'd be like, no, there isn't. That's the same problem with dinosaur bones. You find any little difference, they get a new paper, it's a new species. But there really aren't that many true kinds of dinosaurs. There's just a lot of variety got built into the DNA, so you can get lots of different looking dinosaurs, just like different looking people. Even identical twins are a little bit different. And so nobody's quite the same. 2 Timothy 4:4 says this, they shall turn away their ears from the truth in the end times and shall be turned into fables. And that's exactly what we see in science today. The one good thing we're talking about COVID is now people are a little more skeptical about science. They're not accepting what scientists tell you because it's not always true. It's kind of slanted by personal opinion, and a lot of the geological sciences are the same way. The rocks are real, the fossils are real, but when did those fossils get there, when did those rocks get there, that's just a matter of conjecture. We believe God's word is true, and these rocks are young, 4,500 years old. So the facts are found in the rocks. This is when I was much younger. Had a nice dark mustache. It turned gray, so my wife said, shave it off. So I did. So I don't have a nice dark mustache anymore. But the rocks don't lie. People do. Okay, the rocks themselves don't lie. They don't tell you how old they are. It's people that make up the stories about millions and billions of years based on assumptions that can't be verified. You can't go back in time and check any of these out. So you have to believe me. I'm a scientist. Don't believe anybody that tells you that. Not even me. Dinosaurs, the reason they're not in the Bible is right here. They weren't defined until 1841 by this happy-looking guy here, Sir Richard Owen. He was the world-renowned anatomist. He'd seen more fossils and more bones of living animals than any other person at the time. He took over for Cuvier, who was the renowned anatomist from France a few years earlier, kind of passed the torch to this guy, and he looked at the few bones that they'd found in England up to that point, which was just a few scattered bones, and he realized the hip structure is different. He says dinosaurs, as a group, are reptiles that walk erect. So you can see up here the dinosaurs have hips, like you and I, where they walk erect. And you can see the footprints at Dinosaur Ridge in places where you can see where the footprints are very close together. So the footprints verify that dinosaurs, sure enough, walked. They didn't sprawl like alligators and drag their bellies and drag their tails. There's almost no dinosaur tail draggings or belly draggings, except a couple that were stuck in so much deep mud during the flood that they were dragging their bellies. But most of them just show nice footprints, very close together. And so it is verifiable now. His hypothesis of dinosaurs walking erect does seem to be the truth. Now, hopefully your professors don't look quite that mean. But it was the 19th century when everybody was just angry apparently all the time. And so as some of the people settled here, they were the same way probably back then. Or else he was just British and he was having a stiff upper lip. I don't know. All right, now moving along, we're going to go through this talk if I ever get there. We're going to look at number one. First point is that the myth that dinosaurs are buried slowly. Second myth we're going to look at is that dinosaurs had many ancestors. We'll see that's a myth. Third, that dinosaurs evolved into birds, and even are birds. That's another myth we're going to try to dispel. And finally, that dinosaurs are millions of years old. They used to be 65 million years old when they went extinct, but they changed that about 10, 12 years ago, did some refinement of their time range. They moved their million years. What's a million years? So you might read in your old book 65 million, but it's really now 66 million to about 230 or so. It's kind of in the range of, they're in this one range in the rock record. Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, the Mesozoic they call it. That was the range of the flood where these animals were buried. And you reach a certain point where you hit their environment and boom, there they are worldwide, all buried in those same couple layers we call them. And so there's the dinosaur rocks, I'll call them as we go along. So let's look at the myth that dinosaurs are buried slowly. And Dr. Bob Bacher, I think he used to be at Colorado Boulder here for a while. So after 6 months or a year or two in his book, he says the monsoon rains return, the level of the lake rises, spreading a soft blanket of limey mud over the sun-dried bodies. So he thinks this dinosaur died, and then the lake somehow, lakes don't flood. So I don't know why he used a lake, but that was the environment they interpreted. But he said after 6 months or a year, how many animals die and lay out there for 6 months or a year or two, and then get buried and become a soft, limey mud? And that's not how fossils form. That's not how animals are preserved. You got to bury them fast, and you got to bury them deep. So they just die and get hit by, you hit a deer, you hit an animal, a squirrel, it's not going to be around 6 months from now. It's going to be eaten or rot away, whatever isn't eaten. And so what we find in the rock record is we find bone beds. You find these bones, like in Anthropologist, where I used to dig dinosaurs, you find layers about this thick, only about 3 foot thick, that maybe twice the size of this sanctuary. And you find thousands of bones all torn apart, just like log jams. And a lot of these bones are laying on top of each other like they show there. And you can see that different species are ripped apart. You rarely find a complete specimen or a partially complete specimen. That's quite an accomplishment, because normally they're violently deposited by water. And we find many marine fossils mixed in with the dinosaurs. A gentleman here in your audience brought a shark tooth in that he found in some rocks south of Dinosaur Ridge. It's supposed to be non-marine, but yet we find shark teeth. And we'll see we find shark teeth even in the Hell Creek Formation, which is the rock unit you find all of our T-Rexes in the United States, in eastern Montana and into the Dakotas. And if it goes into Wyoming, it's the Lance. That's the same rock unit. They're just different geologists in different states. But we find all of our T-Rexes there. We find 6 species of sharks in that same rock unit. And one was underneath T-Rex Sue, where we're going to see the bones of the T-Rex Sue in a minute. Right underneath where they dug it out, they found another dinosaur or shark tooth. So what do the evolutionary scientists say? These are all freshwater sharks, because they're found with dinosaurs. And we'll see that's the story, even the bony fishes. And the clams, they have marine clams. So I read an article about this. Some of the paleontologists are annoyed because they're like, these are marine clams, why don't you guys recognize that? And they're like, everybody just ignores it because it doesn't fit the narrative. And so even some of the scientists get annoyed. And we find Spinosaurus mixed with coelacanth fish in Morocco. As a guy came to Denver, I can't think of his first name and last name. His last name was Abraham, I think. He's something. Anyway, he spoke because he had discovered this 50-foot Spinosaurus, bigger than a T-Rex. And it was an ice storm in Dallas, so nobody got there except me and a few others. I'm from Michigan, I know how to drive a little better in ice. And so he showed up at SMU, Southern Methodist University. He was giving a talk, and a very small audience was there. And he was talking about how coelacanths are found, car-sized coelacanth fish are found with the Spinosaurus. Car-sized, probably Fiat-sized or something like that. Not big cars. Yugos, you guys remember the Yugos? Probably Yugo-sized. But coelacanths, where do they live? They live 500 feet down in the ocean today. They're deep water fish. They're supposed to be extinct, and they found them living in the Indian Ocean in 2 different spots in the 1930s, and they're still swimming around today, but they're deep. So why would deep marine fish be found with a dinosaur? And I asked him that after the lecture was over. I said, well, how do you find marine coelacanth fish with dinosaurs? He goes, they must have been freshwater coelacanths back then. So, they have to change the story to fit their story. So today, coelacanths are only found in deep water. Their fossils look the same. Why would they be freshwater? Just because they're found with dinosaurs. Why would freshwater sharks all be freshwater sharks? Just because they're found with dinosaurs. And so it goes on and on and on. And in my home country, where our family name comes from, Clarey, comes from Ireland, the first dinosaurs in Ireland were discovered a few years ago, and they were found in marine rocks. They didn't believe they were dinosaurs. The guy that found them passed away. He was just a non-paleontologist, and he said, these are dinosaur bones. Nobody listened to them because they're found in limestone. And so the first dinosaurs ever found in Ireland, which just were reported last year or the year before, shows that, and we wrote an article on our ICR website, you can read about it. It shows these are found in marine rocks. And in fact, most of the rocks, most of the fossils in the Cretaceous level, the upper levels of dinosaurs in Europe as a whole. And these papers are available online to you as well. They show that almost all dinosaurs in the Cretaceous level in Europe, all across Europe, are found in marine rocks. And the authors said, we thought that was the exception. We found that's the rule. They're found in chalk. They're found in limestone. They're found in marine sands with all these other marine fish. They're like, how can this be? So they figured they must have all got washed off into the ocean. And they did, because the waves of the flood were coming in and going out so far out. They were transporting these dinosaurs. I talked about the other day, I think yesterday, I told some of you that were there about the dinosaur they found in the North Sea. They drilled a well out 75 miles off Norway in the North Sea. Took a core about this big around, pulled it out, they found a dinosaur 1.5 miles down below the bottom of the ocean. Pulled up a dinosaur bone. How did that dinosaur get out there 75 miles offshore? These waves are coming and going, like tsunami waves do. They wash in, they wash out. Animals don't slowly float out to sea and not get eaten. That animal should have been eaten, and dead animals, there's animals that eat that. They eat dead things, even in the ocean. So your carcass wouldn't survive without rapid burial during the flood. Rapid burial is the rule here, just like this. In the Eocene Green River Formation, we see from Europe, we find ichthyosaurs giving live birth, swimming reptiles that are apparently extinct today. We see the fighting dinosaurs, one of my favorites from Mongolia. There's a velociraptor, which for you kids in here, the velociraptor is only about this big, and the skull was about that long. What you see in the movies is Deinonychus, but Steven Spielberg liked the name Velociraptor better. So you see this really poor rendition of a velociraptor that's way too smart and steams up windows, which I don't believe it could do because I don't believe it was warm-blooded. But they're pushing the science on you. And this next movie coming out, you're going to see a feathered dinosaur, a feathered raptor, which again, they're projecting what they want them to be on you. And it's going to become mainstream, sadly. But to my knowledge, there's no dinosaurs that have been shown to have any feathers, and we'll get to that in a minute. But here, this dinosaur is about to bite down. He used to get the arm of the velociraptor right in the mouth with the Protoceratops. About to bite down, and then they were buried instantly. So they call this a life assemblage, because it's showing something that was happening in life. It's like WWE wrestlers. My brother and I remember the Rex Steiners, the Steiner brothers. They just got inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. We went to church with those kids. They were, steroids help. And so now they're big Papa Pump and all this stuff, and they just got in the Hall of Fame. I was like, wow, and look at me. I feel like a failure. These guys there's little dolls of them. There's no dolls of me. I think that would be scary, but anyway, these things, look at that. They're about to bite down, and they were buried that fast. So dinosaurs are buried very rapidly. Any fossil has to be buried fast and deep. You can't let them lay around for a year or two or 6 months or more. You got to bury them fast. And even some of the paleontologists are now coming around to that, realizing, maybe we were wrong. Maybe they have to be buried fast. And the flood gives us those conditions, fast and deep, all over the world. Dinosaurs had many ancestors. You hear stories all the time. They found an ancestor to T-Rex, an ancestor to this. They're constantly looking for the ancestors, because if you believe evolution, you got to be able to have a direct lineage all the way back to the first slimy cell that came out. And so we all come from goo of some sort, according to Darwin. And somehow that first life appeared. Nobody knows how. And then we became humans ultimately. It worked through millions and millions of years. But there's no evidence of anything changing into anything else. The fossil record shows up just complete, boom, different things, different things, different things. So here's another picture of my daughter when she was younger. I had kids so I can get scale. So as a geologist, you don't know how big the rocks are. You got to have your kids there for scale. And so in my dinosaur book, she's in there quite a bit, because she went digging with me a lot in Wyoming. But here at the University of Wyoming, my alma mater, and you can see the big ceratopsian skull, a big horned dinosaur. Ceratopsian means horn-headed. So Triceratops is famous from Wyoming, but there's lots of varieties of these. You can see lots of 2 horns, 3 horns, no horns. I don't think there's any 7-horned ones. But they have lots of horns sticking up on their frills, and all sorts of varieties, be it they're all the same basic animal. Many of these are probably just the same kind. When they're born, they all look the same. Jack Horner says the babies of these, you can't tell the difference. It isn't until they mature that the horns start to come out in different directions. Just like your family looks so different than the next family, the next family, the next family, all these are the same way. And so God loves variety, apparently. But most of these are probably maybe just 1 or 2 or 3 different kinds. So there's not that many kinds you had to take on the ark. But when you look for ancestors to Triceratops and the Ceratopsians, we find those in the dinosaur layers there, Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic. We find them all in the upper Cretaceous. We don't find anything like a Ceratopsian or Triceratops in anything below. You look down below, there's nothing that resembles a Triceratops. So where'd they come from? They just show up fully formed. Same thing with Tyrannosaurus Rex. This is Sioux in Chicago. Anybody been to Field Museum in Chicago to see Tyrannosaurus Rex Sioux? This is about 90% complete, found in the Hell Creek Formation by Sue Hendrickson. So they call it Sue after her. And they thought it was a female. They try to push this idea that big dinosaurs, big meat-eating dinosaurs were females, but I think that's wrong. Just like we see big crocodiles, the biggest ones are usually males. There's no precedence for it, but they don't believe, I don't know why they got this whole idea that the big predators were female, and you see that in the Jurassic Park movies as well. There's no way to tell male and female with dinosaurs, unless they're pregnant. There's a special medullary bone in the legs, and they found about 3 or 4 of these that were pregnant females when they were buried in the flood. And these were generally smaller dinosaurs, so they weren't the biggest ones after all. So the science really goes against that, but they don't care. As you know, don't want to ruin a good story with facts. But Sue was probably a male. And so, like I said the other day, Johnny Cash was correct. It's a boy named Sue. He was ahead of his time there a little bit. Never knew this was going to happen. All right, I told you I make attempts at humor. Bone beds. I got to dig up on a bone bed with Jack Horner's crew. Didn't tell him I was a creationist at the time, but there's a T-Rex tooth in the rocks there. You can see it. This is a small T-Rex, probably a 25-footer. Sue was about 41 feet long. Anyway, but same story, different species here. T-Rexes are found in upper Cretaceous rocks as well, often with Triceratops. And even Triceratops have T-Rex bites on some of them. But yet we look down below, there's no animal that's the ancestor to T-Rexes. There's nothing like a T-Rex in the Jurassic or Triassic layers. T-Rexes just show up fully formed, ready to go, with probably binocular vision. Because you look at the skull of a T-Rex, both eye sockets are looking right at you. So if you saw a T-Rex coming at you, you should have ran a long time before. Don't just stand there and say, oh, they can't see if you don't move. You should have ran. Don't go to the bathroom apparently either, because if you're a lawyer, don't try to go to the bathroom if you're a lawyer. But some of you remember that movie. All right. Well, but the point is there's no ancestors. So, show me the money, as they say in the movies. David Weisample said this, and he probably looked at more dinosaur bones than anybody. He said this a few years back. From my reading the fossil record of dinosaurs, he says, no direct ancestors have been discovered for any dinosaur species. So they can't tie any dinosaur species where they came from. They didn't even know where dinosaurs came from. There's a debate on where dinosaurs, what they're supposed to have come from. Did they come from crocodiles or some other critter? Nobody really exactly knows. He goes, alas, my list of dinosaurian ancestors is an empty one. So when it comes right down to it, even the evolutionists admit they don't know where these things came from, each individual type and even dinosaurs. Here's the Spinosaur that they discovered in Morocco. That's how big it was. So that dinosaur might have been 800 years old. Because some of these dinosaurs, they continue to grow throughout their lifetime if they're cold-blooded, which I believe they were. So these big 131-foot-long seismosaurs, they're probably 700, 800 years old. And you're like, whoa, I never thought of that. Well, how old were the humans in the pre-flood? 800, 900 years old. So the bigger the dinosaurs we find are probably just really hundreds of years old. Even though they try to count bone rings, there's a point where you can't count them anymore. They try to say, oh, T-Rex Sue was 27 years old. That's the minimum age, because they can see a few bone rings, but after a while, you stop making these rings that you can count. It's not quite like tree rings. It works for a while when they're young, but eventually you can't tell. So T-Rex Sue was probably 800 years old, 500 years old. We don't know. Myth busting 2, the facts. All fossils appear in rocks without ancestors, even trilobites. They looked for, a couple of years ago, there was a study where they were looking for the ancestors of the trilobites in the rocks below the Cambrian. They looked and looked and looked, and they found nothing. Looked all over the world, they found nothing. They don't know. Suddenly eyes show up in the rock record, which baffled Darwin even. All fossils show a sudden appearance and stasis. They stay the same, and they disappear. So as the flood buried different environments, they show up suddenly, and then they disappear just as quickly as the water went higher and bring in new fossils. There's no known ancestors to any dinosaur group, or really any animal or plant in the fossil record. Move on to number 3. Dinosaurs, supposedly, they say evolved into birds. Let's look at that. Do we really find this? This is what you're going to see this summer on June 10th. When Jurassic World comes out, the third part of it, you're going to see an animal like this, maybe not with the white beak. This is like our national bird. This isn't right, but they forget to look at the hip structure in the back, as we'll see in a minute. They can make the arms look as funny as they want in the front, but there are bony-tailed birds that look like this, but they're not dinosaurs. Here's a true bird, a bony-tailed bird, Archaeopteryx, famous specimen. This is, I think, the Berlin or the London specimen. I'm not sure which one. Tried to go see it in London, and all they show is a replica. The real one's hidden around behind the back rooms. Like, I come all this way to London to see the Archaeopteryx, and I can't even see the real thing. I was disappointed. I left England going, it's a scam. But no, I finally had to go to Wyoming. Thermopolis, Wyoming, you can go up there and you can see an original specimen behind 3 levels of glass. But it's the only Archaeopteryx on display in the Western Hemisphere. It's one of the few on display in any museum. So if you get a chance to go to Thermopolis, it's worth it to see an Archaeopteryx. Doesn't quite look like that, but you see these are real feathers. These are real pennaceous feathers. They've done studies, they figured this thing could fly somewhat like a pheasant. So it wasn't a really good flyer. That's why it got buried in Jurassic rocks, the middle dinosaur layers. They find all these in southern Germany, Bavaria, in this one particular rock unit that's very, very fine grained, so it preserves feathers. But this is what scientists are saying are protofeathers, because feathers had to evolve from scales in the evolutionary worldview. And so they say, oh, look, Spinosaurus had protofeathers, these little hairy-looking things. You can see it probably did have some changes in maybe bands on its tail, but it looks like hair. Well, what are these, really? Stephen Brissett says this in an article he published in Scientific American 7 years ago now, and it was a new feathered dinosaur was the headline. But when you read through it, in the fine print, it said this: the bones of these species are covered with a thick feathery fluff, not quill pen feathers of living birds, but simpler filament-like feathers that look like hair. But the headline says feathered dinosaur. So most of you, oh, feathered dinosaur. But it's really not. It's hair-like stuff. What is that stuff? Protofeathers are not feathers at all. Alan Fiducia, who's an evolutionist, he's a bird paleontologist, went to the University of Michigan where my brother went. That's why he's so arrogant. Alan Fiducia is staying up against the evolutionary community, saying that, you guys are wrong, but he's shunned because he doesn't go along with the consensus. He says consensus isn't science, and that's true. Just because everybody says it doesn't make it right. And we're finding that out with COVID. Just because they say it doesn't make it right. Fiducia says these things, he did some empirical studies, and he showed that these are just collagen fibers coming out from the skin. We all have collagen in our skin. So you squish an animal, you're going to get these hair-like structures coming off. That's the collagenous fibers. He squished a dolphin, piece of a dolphin here, squished it, and you saw these hair-like structures coming off. The dolphins aren't that hairy. There's a little hair because they're mammals, but they don't have that much hair. That's collagen in the skin. That's exactly what you're seeing in these dinosaurs, and that is probably what they're seeing. There's no evidence of any feathers or hair on the dinosaurs. There's collagen from the skin. And then, of course, most evidence comes from one location in China, which should worry you, because you can't believe anything the Chinese give us. As we'll see, there are some hoaxes that came from China in a minute. This is Microraptor, which a lot of people say this is a dinosaur with feathers. And even a lot of creation paleontologists, my friends and brethren in creation, say this is a feathered dinosaur. But it's a feathered bird. Alan Fiducia, who knows birds, and he's an evolutionist, as I just mentioned, he believes this is a bird as well. And it's got feathers on its back legs, but so did Archaeopteryx. If you look carefully at Archaeopteryx, this is almost probably the same kind of animal as Archaeopteryx. But they call it a different name because it's found on a different continent. But it's really probably the same things. Birds have to have beaks. So this has a broken beak, but it has a beak because they have to be able to fluff their feathers up, comb them back up. You can't have a T-Rex with feathers and they can't fix its feathers. Birds spend like half their day fixing their feathers because they have to. They're very important to fly with. You got to keep them all the barbs all together and everything kind of. You have to groom yourself if you're a bird, and this thing could do it. And it's also the back legs are completely different than a dinosaur. Dinosaurs walk balanced on their hips. Birds walk balanced on their knees. Their thighs are inside their body. They kind of walk around on their knees, kind of walking kind of funny, completely differently. And they ignore that. They ignore the back hips of these animals. If you pull these legs down, this animal, it falls over because it's too front heavy. Make it walk like a dinosaur, it'll fall over. So this is a bird with a bony tail, just like Archaeopteryx. And unfortunately, there's a lot of creation paleontologists on YouTube and all these shows saying, oh yes, God made dinosaurs with feathers. But these are birds with feathers, not dinosaurs. And this came from China in 1999. You might have the issue in National Geographic. I dug around a bunch of libraries in Dallas looking for this. Couldn't hardly find it. I finally found it in one library, this issue, 1999, that talked about Archaeopteryx. It's supposed to be a half bird, half dinosaur. It's the missing link. They had the proof that they all wanted, and all the paleontologists, woohoo! Well, when they CT scanned it, they found it was a half a bird glued to half a dinosaur. They bought it at a rock and gem show in Tucson, didn't pull it out of the earth themselves. So, of course, you're opening up to fraud when that happens, and that's bad science. But they didn't care. It was what they wanted to see, so they believed it until they did the CT scan at the University of Texas and showed this was a half of a bird glued to half a dinosaur. So sure enough, it's half bird, half dinosaur, but it's not the same animal. So it was just a total hoax that they spent $70,000 on buying and making a TV show and a whole issue. They put a retraction in about a year and a half later in National Geographic, towards the end of their issue, about a 2-page retraction saying, well, it wasn't our fault, sorry. But it really was, because they did bad science to begin with. And in 2017, which is ignored by a lot of people, Phil Bell and his colleagues said they studied T-Rexes and they looked at the skin imprints and they said this shows without question T-Rex had scaly skin. Yet you'll still see T-Rexes in the popular magazines today with feathers. They can't fix their feathers because their jaw isn't right, and they put them out, and they show right here in 2017, without question. And here's T-Rex skin. They looked at a lot of this, they said, yep, no feathers. But they said all the other theropods, meat eaters, still had feathers. But they had to exclude T-Rexes out of that. So unfortunately, you'll still see people talking about T-Rexes with feathers, but they had no feathers. Even the science came to their senses here and showed that. And again, here's the biggest problem with birds evolving into or dinosaurs evolving into birds, is that the birds are found in Jurassic, the middle dinosaur layers, the Archaeopteryx, fully birds with feathers. And the most bird-like dinosaurs, they say, are found in the Cretaceous rocks above it. So this scenario over here they show you all the time is out of order. The things in the front should be behind. That's the way you find them in the rocks. As a geologist, the rocks are there to give you the pages of what happened. And so you can't change things around like they do. And so what do? They make up a story called ghost lineages. And they say, well, the ancestor to these bird-like dinosaurs, the raptors, must be down below birds. So they move a line down there, and then they draw another line from the birds down to that same unknown ancestor. And they say, oh, there was problem solved. But these are dashed lines. That means you're making it up. Unknown ancestor, it means you're making it up just to fit the story. The rocks show a completely different story. And that's what Gunter Weil said from the Euro Museum in Germany. So the dinosaurs in China are not the ancestors of birds. They can't be because they're later than Archaeopteryx. They're found in rocks above it. There must have been older dinosaurs with feathers, yet we haven't found any evidence for them, unfortunately. So they want it to be so bad, but yet the rocks show a completely different order to what they're telling people. But they're telling people this like it's a fact. They're showing it in the movies like it's a fact. And so our young kids are being influenced by these movies and DVDs and in their textbooks by these lies that go against what the rocks actually show. Dinosaurs did not evolve into birds. God made the birds on day 5. God made the dinosaurs on day 6. Completely different animals. Birds are buried in rocks before the bird-like dinosaurs, the ones they claim are bird-like. And of course, some bird-like dinosaurs are just hoaxes, and so you don't have to worry about seeing a chicken running around. They're actually trying to do, for years they've been trying to take a chicken egg and put DNA into it, doing this Evo-Devo stuff, and they've been working and getting lots of government funding to try to make a chicken into a dinosaur, and it hasn't worked. And you wonder why. When you start with a false premise, you're not going to get any results. And so it's a hoax that they're pulling on people. But that doesn't stop them. They're still teaching it. And they also say dinosaurs are millions of years old. And of course, in the last 20 or so years, since 2005, and even before, we found original proteins and collagens in dinosaurs, cells, osteocytes, blood cell-looking things. They don't want to admit quite are red blood cells, but they probably are. Blood vessels are still flexible. They've even found worm fossils that are supposed to be 500 million years old that are still original proteins. So the dinosaurs are supposed to only be 68 or 195 million years old. Here's a blood vessel, and you can see the osteocytes down here, the bone-making cells with the little philia coming off. And those little black dots are probably red blood cells in the blood vessel. So they admit that these are real, but they don't know how they could be preserved for millions and millions of years. How do you preserve organic tissues like this for millions and millions of years? And here's a mosasaur, swimming reptile found in Kansas, washed in from the flood. There's an area that's red in there. That red is because there's hemoglobin, the protein hemoglobin, which makes your blood red. It's still there. And the parts of the retina and the scales are still there, original parts. There's been over 120 papers now published in the evolutionary community. They're not creationists. These are all the people that are finding it. They're evolutionary scientists. But yet, the elephant in the room is, how can they survive? And they really don't have a good explanation. They throw this, bathing them in an iron solution in 2 years' time, and no, this one looks like it decayed more. They just did a visual inspection, and like, that's not a good scientific study. To try to say these things can last millions of years. There's no way, based on physical chemists who studied these for years, that these things can last that long. So here's the evidence slapping them in the face. Just like those Chinese carp that jump out of the water. And they, even Jack Horner says, well, the creationists are going to love this stuff. And we do. Because it's really, really strong evidence that the Earth is young, that the fossils were deposited 4,500 years ago and not millions of years ago. It goes against their lies. And that's what upsets them the most. So you'll see this in the textbooks, and most students don't even hear about this. They're now starting to call these chemical fossils, and they're just kind of like, they're not talking about the elephant in the room. The chemical fossils can't survive millions of years. That's not in the textbooks. But they admit that they're there. So there's lots of evidence of dinosaurs and humans after the flood. In the book of Job, we can read, behold, now behemoth was I made with you on day 6. I think God's referring to here. Dinosaurs and humans are made on day 6. He eats grass like an ox, strength is in his loins, force in the muscles of his belly, he moves his tail like a cedar. So, that some of your Bibles will say hippo or elephant. They don't have tails like a cedar. You gotta have a big animal tail. And dinosaurs, when they walked along, they had their tail kind of swaying back and forth, balanced perfectly the way God designed them. The long necks particularly, which is probably what behemoth is. They just left the Hebrew word in there. They didn't know what it was. Remember, no dinosaur word was found in the Bible because it wasn't translated till hundreds of years, or it was translated hundreds of years before the word dinosaur was invented. So 1611, the King James comes out. Dinosaur was coined 1841. So that's why you see dragons in the Bible, behemoth in the Bible, leviathan in the Bible, but you don't see the word dinosaur because it wasn't invented yet. And dinosaurs even ate grass. They scoffed at that for many years. Oh, grass didn't evolve until after dinosaurs because it's hard to fossilize grass. So they see grass above the dinosaurs but not with them, and they say, oh, there's no dinosaurs with grass. But yet, in 2005 again, in India, they found dinosaur dung with these big long-necked dinosaur fossils, and they found 5 species of grass in the dung. Just so you can see what horses ate by their droppings, you can see what the dinosaurs ate by their droppings. They preserved the grass. 5 species of grass. So they really were eating grass. The Bible was right all along. We just scoffed at it. Evolutionary scientists scoff at it. Bob Barker tries to explain away in a talk he gave at a Geological Society of America meeting a couple years ago in Indianapolis. He kind of made fun of the tail like a cedar. He tried to say it was just an elephant. But it was talking about the elephant genitalia. Like, that's not a cedar tree. I don't care who you are. And he actually presented that I apologize for that in church, but that's what he said. And it was like, okay, tail like a cedar. To me, this is tail like a cedar. This is a Mesopotamian cylinder. You roll it out, thousands of years old. You can see the legs coming straight down. How did they know the leg came straight down? We didn't know that till 1841. Long tail, long neck. They're not sprawling. Sauropods from the Carlisle Cathedral of 1478. What looks like 2 sauropods. Legs coming straight down. It wasn't until 400 years later they discovered the legs came straight down. How did they know if they hadn't seen them? Here's Stegosaurus. We have a copy of this at our museum in Dallas. Our Discovery Center, you can see this. There's a water buffalo, there's a monkey, there's all these animals that are still alive today, then there's this in the middle of it all. Looks a lot like a Stegosaurus, even the fan shape. And the legs, again, coming straight down. How did they know to draw it like this if they hadn't seen them? So there's lots of evidence. Even you look at the Welsh flag, the dragon, the legs come straight down. How did they know? All these dragons are probably just dinosaurs that were killed. Lions or the knights were killing the dragons. We're really killing the small dinosaurs after the flood. So soft tissue creates a problem for the evolutionists. They can't explain away how these things can survive for millions of years, but it's not a problem for us. Fossils don't take long to form, they just take the right conditions. And here, I was digging dinosaurs in Thermopolis there with my hat on, and learned how to plaster up the bones. So I'll leave my Baptist plastered joke out there. This is how Baptists get plastered. And so you get, I had to put it in there. All right, 4 evolutionary myths busted. We'll wrap it up with this. Number 1, dinosaurs were not buried slowly, they're buried rapidly in the flood. The flood provides the perfect conditions to bury millions and billions and billions of fossils, and that's what we see all over the earth. But yet people deny there was a global flood. When we see the same fossils all over the world at the same locations and the same rock levels. It's amazing how you can't see the global nature of it all. Secondly, dinosaurs did not have ancestral forms. None of them did. No fossil has an ancestor below it. They just find different animals through the rock record. That was the order they were buried in the flood. But that's another talk. Third, dinosaurs did not evolve into birds. They're not even related to birds, I don't believe, at all. They're made on different days in the creation week. Birds had feathers, dinosaurs didn't. I haven't seen a dinosaur with a feather yet, but you'll see them, and they're not at all the same. So I don't think dinosaurs were even warm-blooded. So they're pushing warm-blooded dinosaurs. You know, they steam the windows up in the movies, but I don't believe they were even warm-blooded. There's a lot of evidence to the contrary. The skull shape, the brain size, the brain shape of dinosaurs looks like crocodile brain shape, not like a bird shape at all. Completely different processing parts that are enhanced, just like crocodiles. Their nasal passages are too small to be a warm-blooded animal. They don't have turbinates in them, if you know what that is, to warm the air that mammals we have. Dinosaurs didn't. So everything about their anatomy makes them look like they're cold-blooded. Yet scientists ignore all that and say, oh, they're warm-blooded. But I don't think they're even anything like a bird, more like a crocodile. Fourth, dinosaurs are not millions of years old. They're only 4,500 years old. That's what those original proteins and tissues are screaming. You know, it's hard to say you have proof in geology because it's a forensic science. But to me, this is as close to proof as you can get that dinosaurs and all the fossils we find are not that old. Because they're not just dinosaurs, but other animals are finding original proteins again and again and again and again. The evidence is there, but yet they don't want to believe it. It's right in front of them. The evidence for the flood is right there below our feet. But people don't want to believe it. Noah told people there's going to be a flood. Only 8 people believed it. Jesus is our salvation, but not enough people are believing it, even though they're told and they see the evidence. We have a few of these left. I think there's 4 of my dinosaur book where a lot of this came from in the back. So rush, don't walk. Run, don't walk. Be the first to get back there to get them. I'll attempt to sign them for you as well, but this puts everything I know about dinosaurs in one book, which, again, it's only 195 pages. I don't know that much, but I try to put it in there. And then my wife and I wrote some children's books. This is the first one. There's a second one we have as well, plus the little dolls that go with it. We wanted to write some books. She was a kindergarten teacher and had a Christian school. She had to cross out the millions of years in the books because she didn't want to teach that nonsense. So we wrote some stories. This is when you can read to the grandkids or the kids. Here's some facts in there. There's some stuff at the back for parents to read as well that will help out. But it's a story you can read. We tried it on our grandkids. It works wonderful. Pictures are really neat. And you can tell the male and female dinosaurs by the eyelashes. Apparently the female dinosaurs have longer eyelashes, but in reality it's the males that have longer eyelashes than the females, and you guys have to fake yours. Isn't that right? Most of the boys have longer eyelashes. Now there's DVDs, if you don't want to read a book. Have any of these left, Joel? A couple of these DVD sets. They're 4 22-minute videos. One of them is on the original dinosaur tissues. This was made about 5 years ago, but it's still really good stuff if you don't have it. And then this just came out during COVID. We were busy sitting at home rewriting stuff. And so we rewrote a lot of this book that came out in 2020, along with my carved in stone book, which is your pastor has the only copy. That came out in March 2020. What a time to come out, huh? Just everything shut down. It's like, But it's been a really good seller. And we've sold out the first printing. We're into the second printing. And so I'm really happy that people are reading about the rocks that I've studied across multiple continents to show there really was a global flood. But some of that's in here as well. Plus things in here that shows from a geneticist who used to run the genetics lab at Clemson for many years, millions of dollars in research money he used to work with. And he quit and went to ICR. And he compared humans and chimps, the complete genome as much as we have. and it shows we're only about 80 to 82% like chimps. That 98% is a lie. You see people walking around 98% like a chimp. No, you're not. Maybe you think you are. But they only cherry-picked the most common parts when they did that. But when they do the whole thing, even an evolutionary guy did the same thing, got the same result. And he discussed that in the book. So we're nothing like chimps. 20% different. That's a lot when it comes to DNA. And if you don't do anything else today and you're like, this guy's annoying me, I'm going to go home, I'm never coming back, hopefully you don't, sign up for our free bi-monthly X and Facts. We went every other month now, so we have more time to write books and do other things. There's only like 6 or 7 scientists on our staff. We're trying to find some more. But there's not a lot of young Earth creationists out there. And so if you want to go into science, get an advanced degree, get a PhD, we need more people. So don't think you can't get a job with us, because I'm getting old. I need a new young geologist to take over for me. So we need new biologists, we need new astronomers, we need new physicists, we need new chemists. There's a whole world open of young Earth creationism studies. There's just not enough of us. We need more that look at the truth of God's word and look at science from that angle. So I know with that I'll quit and turn it back over to the pastor. I think I went too long, but we'll quit there for now. More later.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clarey. Appreciate you. Well, was that not fantastic? Yeah, absolutely. Let's have another round of applause. Well, we're going to take 15 minutes or so until we begin our service, but I do want to absolutely encourage you. You want to go go meet with Dave and Joel and talk about the great resources that are available. That's only a fraction of what's available online at icr.org or icr.org. And we'd sure look forward to having you back and chatting a little bit more in about 15 minutes. Enjoy your break.